YouTube, how's it going? The Godows is back, and there's a lot of NFL draft rumors floating around everywhere, especially today. Some very interesting ones involving quarterbacks, some of the top picks, and more. We're going to discuss all that. We're going to break down, could they happen? Will they happen? Are they a bunch of bullshit? Are they smoke? We're going to talk about it, some interesting ones here. So I'm really excited about this. Bunch of NFL draft content on the channel. More to come. We live during day one of the NFL draft right here. Live analysis for each pick, day 2 and 3 on our Twitter. Follow our Twitter, live news, rumors, updates. We're talking about a lot of this already on Twitter, so check that out. Link pinned in the comments for that. Our Discord sponsors, GLD Shop, have their Cowboys chain on right now. They have more NFL teams. Liquid IV, Walk the Mock. Links pinned in the comments for all that. Don't forget to like, subscribe to notifications on. Check out our recent content. You will not be disappointed. First one, real quick. This isn't a big one. The other ones on this video are more intriguing. Bryce Young, a lock at number 1. It's just sounding like that. People are calling, more and more people are calling, legitimate sources calling him a lock. Maybe you out there already thought this the second the Panthers traded up to get that first pick. A lot of you out there probably like that. I've been more of a believer of CJ Stroud. Maybe I'm a little guilty of just predicting what they should do. Like, they got to make this decision because I love Bryce Young, but I like CJ Stroud that much, and he just really felt like a McCown Reich type guy. But it's sounding more and more like Bryce Young is the guy, and he's also canceling all or not taking any more visits. It just really feels like, and there's a lot of people that have been saying this leading up to this day and then confirming it now, that it's pretty much a lock that Bryce Young goes number 1. So I think we all can say at this point, we'll throw Peter Griffin up there. It's a fact that Bryce Young is going first. And for a little bit, it did maybe feel like the Panthers were trying to bait the Texans into trading up for Bryce Young, and they were just going to take Stroud either way. Some people thought that, but it's just, there's just so much evidence, I guess, right now, legitimate sources that say Young is going first. So we're going to believe that. Plus, a lot of the other stuff we're about to talk about kind of has to do with what's going to happen since Bryce Young is off the board. So, usually when it's smoke, it's kind of one thing by itself. Like, nothing else really makes sense with that thing, if you know what I mean. Like, so Bryce Young, we'll say Bryce Young is going first. We believe it. All these other rumors, especially a lot of the ones we're going to talk about, have to do with the scenario of Bryce Young going first. Like, they don't make sense, these other rumors, if Bryce Young is still on the board. So it's all kind of coming together. Like, these are floating around just because teams know Bryce Young is off the board, so it all kind of fits together. So my latest mock draft, I still had Stroud 1, so I do have to update my mock draft because I'm believing this at this point here. And I'm believing a lot of this stuff. The last couple years, and this is an interesting one. This is kind of a two-parter. But the last few years, I've realized, like, the week or two up to the draft, the day of the draft, the rumors were not smoke, especially when you think they are. I think it's more like a month or 3 weeks out. Like, now we're starting to get to the point where not all of it, but a bit of it might be true. Whether it happens or not, teams, might be considering what the rumor is. But Texans are and we're going to talk about the Texans and quarterbacks a bit, throughout this video here. But earlier today, Ian Rappaport was on the Pat McAfee show, and he said, he's hearing what everyone's saying. He's hearing the rumors that the Texans aren't going to take a quarterback at 2 since Bryce Young's gone, and they're going to go this other route. He's hearing it, but he says he's just not really believing it. He would be very surprised if the Texans didn't go quarterback at 2. So he's basically saying quarterback at 2. And then Lance Zierlein, who also works with NFL Network, and does seem to have some insider information on the Texans, not only this year, but in the past as well. And it's been pretty accurate, actually, especially last year. He called Stingley and Kenyon Green, and those were kind of not off-the-wall picks, but sort of off-the-wall leading up until the closing days of the NFL draft, and he had a lot earlier in that, too, and he's had more in the past. But he was saying and kind of getting into Twitter wars, and he was actually in my mentions probably talking with a lot of you guys that are watching this video, because people that follow me replying to my tweet about Zierlein saying that they might be looking to trade the pick, and he was kind of arguing with some of you guys maybe that are watching this video, so that was pretty interesting. But two sources that I definitely trust. This isn't about to be me like picking a person, really. It's just kind of the rumor, the report. But what Zierlein was saying is that the Texans are actually looking to shop that second pick. And of course, Casero, their GM, said that they're not shopping it, but they're taking calls. I wouldn't really believe exactly what GMs say this close to the NFL draft, and that could mean a number of things like, we're taking calls. People are calling us. Hey, somebody else, they're kind of baiting somebody else to call them and make the call and offer something. It could mean a number of things, could be accurate. But he's saying they're looking to possibly trade the pick, and he's basically getting at that they don't want a quarterback at 2 since Bryce Young is gone. So they're looking to trade it to a team that needs a quarterback badly. They come up, give up a bunch away to the Texans. The Texans go back and get their guy. And we're going to talk about more about who that guy could be. But if they were going to move back like that and take themselves out of a spot to get a CJ Stroud or a quarterback like that, they obviously don't want a quarterback. So that's my takeaway from this side right here, is they could look to trade. He isn't saying, and he kind of cleared this up, on Twitter as well, that he's not saying they're going to trade it, and he was actually saying teams may be hesitant to trade and take the pick, trade away things and take this pick because they feel a quarterback might drop to them or they just don't see the value. So his take is that they would like to trade the pick and maybe they stay put and if they can't trade it and they don't take a quarterback, which some people have been reporting as well very recently. So this is very interesting because this is two different sides here and two trustworthy people, I'd say. But the one I can argue both sides here because you can sit here and say, like, Texans badly need a quarterback. How could they possibly pass on a quarterback? How could they possibly pass on CJ Stroud? That's the thinking right away. Like, how could they? A guy that we thought maybe would go one for a bit there, now is looking like Bryce Young. And then the other side of it is kind of matching what we've been hearing a little bit recently, that they really only like Bryce Young. They could pass on a quarterback at 2, take the best defensive player available. And the more and more I think about this, I'm kind of siding towards this side over here, Lance Zierlein side. And I'm not really choosing a person because, Rappaport's maybe the guy we trust the most, for a reason. But the more and I have Smoke and Jay, if you remember the meme with Jay Cutler, Smoke and Jay Cutler. So that's the Smoke. Even though I don't really think this is Smoke. What I think this is I think this is Rappaport kind of saying what I said just a second ago. It's hard to believe them passing on a quarterback. It's hard to believe them passing on CJ Stroud. The way I heard him say that, that's kind of what I took out of it. Like he'd be surprised, like himself, like he's hearing all the rumors, but he'd be surprised. Like they have to take a quarterback at 2, right? That's kind of more of like an opinion, like they have to do this. So that's the way I look at it. And a lot of these rumors we're going to talk about kind of go into this, especially the next one too. So based on everything I just said and the other rumors and everything that's going on, it's really almost sounding like the Texans don't want a quarterback at 2. I think their A+ scenario is to get more picks and still get their guy. And we can talk about in a little bit who their guy might be. That's A+ scenario, but if they don't trade back, they're not going to go all of a sudden like, I guess we'll take a quarterback. They're not going to do that. And if they do take a quarterback at 2, they wanted one all along. We'll say Stroud, they wanted him all along, if they do take a quarterback, then you just change their mind right there. So, that's my stance on it. It's a very interesting situation because do they trade it? Who comes up to 2? Who takes the quarterback there? There's two teams there's more than 2 teams, but 2 teams that we've talked about possibly moving up for a quarterback. The 2 teams are Colts and Titans, who are in the Texans division. So that kind of, do they trade? They could trade. We've seen in division trades. We've seen it last year. Multiple NFC North. The Vikings trade with the Lions and traded with the Packers as well. So it could happen. Do you help a team in your division get a quarterback though? So that kind of leaves the Raiders. If a team were to come up for a quarterback at 2, I would say probably the Raiders, and it'd be for CJ Stroud. If a team trades up for 2, they got to be taking CJ Stroud, right? That's where I'm at with that. So that could shake up the draft, or they can stay put and they can take the best defensive player. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But we want to talk about Schefter's report, which was actually just a little bit ago. And this is probably the most interesting piece of information today, along with the Texans report. And these all these kind of all go together. Like they all like mix together, I think. And that's what's very interesting. And that's why I'm kind of believing a lot of these. Because so Adam Schefter says there won't be a run on quarterbacks. We've heard like there's going to be a quarterback 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, and 4. He's saying that won't happen. He's saying it could happen. I really believe he doesn't think that he believes there's no way there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterback. He does not believe that. That will happen, but he's saying it's a possibility 3 quarterbacks can go in the top 4 or 2 quarterbacks in the top 3. But he's saying, there won't be a run, and there's actually a chance that it's only 1 quarterback in the top 3, and that means there's a chance that the Colts will get their pick and the 1 quarterback being Bryce Young. So their pick between the rest of the quarterbacks here listed from C.J. Stroud to Hooker, unlikely to be Hooker, obviously. So they get the second quarterback. Teams are willing to wait for a quarterback, is what he said. He said this. He didn't tweet this. He said, unless he is going to tweet it, but he said it live on the air, NFL Live, so legitimate. So it's very interesting. And then Dan Orlovsky's on there as well, and he's just disagreeing. They made a bet, actually. He's like, I'll bet you $10. There was some odds involved, but Schefter's like, done. We're doing that deal. Like, he seemed really confident, but he did make sure to say, it's not guaranteed. 2 quarterbacks can go in the top 3. It's not guaranteed to be 1, but he seemed very confident. And this kind of reminded me of, it's a different quarterback class than last year, but last year we were talking about all these quarterbacks going earlier than they should, and all these quarterbacks going in the first round, and really only Kenny Pickett went in the first round. They all got pushed back further. There's always hype around the quarterback. Now, this quarterback class is a lot better, but there's always hype about the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe it's just not going to happen. Once again, there was just hype on the quarterback. Doesn't mean they're going to drop to the third round like Willis, Ritter, and Corral did last year. No, it's a different class, but they could drop a little bit, and you got teams willing to wait. And this makes sense. This makes sense for a lot of reasons. So so when I say this is a fact, I'm not saying for sure. I'm with Schefter here. I'm not saying for sure the second quarterback's gonna be at the Colts pick. I'm not saying that's for sure. Somebody could trade up, get their quarterback. Very possible. I'm saying this is a possibility, a pretty decent possibility, like Schefter said. So I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm not saying for sure. And I'm starting to lean towards the prediction of what Schefter's saying. Like, actually, we'll make another mock. We'll make multiple more mocks here. But so I'm believing that this is a possibility. That's the best way for me to explain it there. But this is making a lot of sense with everything else, too. There's reports that the Texans might pass on a quarterback at 2. So this matches up with that. And there's reports that the Texans actually want to trade 2. But like Zerline was saying, he said that, but he also said it might be hard for them to trade that. It was actually in my mention saying that as well. It's going to be hard for them to trade that pick because teams just don't want to give up a lot, and they think they can sit there and wait for their quarterback. This matches with that as well. And if you think about it, if teams know that Bryce Young's going 1, which we kind of already locked in, and a lot of you already have locked in way before me. You're ahead of it. You beat me to it. So Bryce Young 1. And then let's say teams know what we're kind of learning right now that we don't know for sure, but the Texans pass on a quarterback at 2. All right, so 1's not going 2, and then the Cardinals at 3. So why, if the Texans are not going to take quarterbacks, so if we need to trade up, why not just trade a 3? You give up less. You don't have to worry about the Texans because it sounds like they're going to take a defensive player. Maybe those teams are saying that so they can trade up to 3, but maybe they don't need to because the team, you might have to hop the Colts, but the Colts are going to take the second one at 4, and then there's a bunch of teams that just aren't going to take a quarterback, so a team like the Raiders might get the next crack at number 3, so they're willing to wait. A team like the Tennessee Titans, they're willing to wait or trade up just a tiny bit because they realize some other quarterbacks might get pushed back, and there's not even a guarantee the Raiders take one, even if it gets pushed back. So all of that is kind of making sense. Like with the Texans news, this news, they kind of go together, and then with this news, I could have talked about this before the last one, because this kind of tells me, like, siding what Zerline said kind of makes sense too. So they kind of go together here. So could it be Bryce Young 1? We think so. Then could it be a defensive player? Which we're Texans fans. We're gonna any type of NFL draft fan here. We're gonna talk about it here. Who it could be, but defensive player at 2. And then 3, the Cardinals, and maybe teams are like, we don't really want to trade up because the quarterbacks look like they might drop because the Texans passed on 1, and the Cardinals could go, hey, maybe it's just this certain defensive player is just too good to pass on because maybe the Texans they took a different defensive player. They passed on this defensive player. Will Anderson's still there, so maybe they stay put and take him. So maybe it's like both sides, not wanting to trade there. And then the Colts get the next crack at the quarterback, which would be in this scenario the second quarterback there, and it kind of pushes the quarterbacks back then. So a lot of this is intriguing, but this might have been the most intriguing piece of news. And then talking about the Texans, this was Peter King of Sports Illustrated. He usually has some good inside information this time of the year, every year. So legitimate guy that's been around forever. But he says that Tyree Wilson is in competition with Will Anderson to be the second overall pick. And he was kind of hinting at that he thinks it's going to be one of those two defenders. But he also went on to mention Stroud, like Stroud's got to be the pick. But it was almost like what Rappaport's saying. Like all this goes together. It's almost like what I'm saying too. Like Stroud has to be the pick, right? Like this is a legitimate quarterback prospect, a potential elite quarterback prospect. They need a quarterback so bad. He has to be the pick. That was almost what Peter King was kind of saying in his article, kind of like what Rappaport's saying, kind of like what I'm saying. Like they have to take him. But almost what I got out of his article, which you don't hear him talking, so it's not really that difficult, but maybe a little difficult to understand fully. But yeah, he was kind of hinting at it. It's probably going to be a defensive player, and it's one of these two guys. It's don't lock in Will Anderson. Tyree Wilson is in the conversation there, so Tyree Wilson could go too. And I've been talking about this kind of before a lot of this, that I love the Tyree Wilson fit with the Texans. Now, does that mean I would take Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson? No, I still take Will Anderson because I just think he's just the better edge rusher, better player. I'm more about just getting the best player over fit. Of course, if a guy just completely does not fit, like he is not going to work on this team, period, then understandable. But that's not the case with these top-tier players, especially a guy like Will Anderson. To me, Will Anderson can be, I don't want to compare him to Nick Bosa, but that style of impact of a pass rusher for DeMeco Ryans, where Wilson isn't like that type of guy. To me, in my opinion, he's more like an Arik Armstead, who was a big, important piece in that 49ers DeMeco Ryans defense. But that is why I love the fit. Wilson, to me, I think he can be an elite player if you have him be a versatile weapon. Like you move him around a bit. You use him inside and outside because he almost plays like an interior defensive lineman in an edge rusher's body. He's a mismatch from the inside. So I think he needs to be used like that. He's very good stopping the run. He's powerful. He's long, for all those reasons. So, and I think DeMeco Ryans would use him that way, kind of like an Armstead. So that's why I absolutely love the fit with the Texans. I do love the fit. But I just like Will Anderson that much better. It's a guy you're only going to use off the edge, so maybe you get more out of Wilson, but I think you get a lot more from Anderson off the edge. The explosive pass rusher that was a high impact, productive player. So I could see them going either way. But he's not really. Once again, he's not really saying that Tyree Wilson's for sure going to, or he's going over Will. And not really saying that. So I do think this is a fact. I do think they are strongly considering, or maybe they decided already, but they're strongly considered Tyree Wilson. But what is interesting is kind of going back to some of the last reports that we just talked about, some of the last rumors, like what's being floated around there. They might want to trade back. We don't know that. They might want to trade back. But if they wanted to trade back, and target somebody, we know it wouldn't be, you don't do that for a quarterback. So it's got to be a defensive player. Could it be for Will Anderson? But then you got the Cardinals at 3 who've been linked to Will Anderson, and you got, how far are you going to trade back? You got the Seahawks and the Lions, 5, 6. Those teams would take Will Anderson. So you don't want to trade back, and who knows? Maybe they don't want to trade back. Maybe that's a bunch of smoke, but but you don't, if they do want to trade back, you don't want to trade back to get CJ Stroud. That's not the plan, or Will Anderson, because some of these other teams they're gonna take him. It'd make more sense if it was Tyree Wilson. So if they can't trade the pick, they don't want a quarterback. Again, they maybe don't want to trade the pick. They maybe want a quarterback or two, all up in play, right? They're all in play right now. But if it is true that they do want to trade back to target somebody, I think it's more likely that is Tyree Wilson. So if they decided that's their guy and they can't trade the pick, they're going to take their guy. And I do love the fit. I think they'll like the fit. I don't really like him at second overall or before Willie Anderson. But there's teams like the Texans, like I would grade it a little weird because this is kind of a rare situation. I would probably Grade the Texans taking Wilson at 2. That's tough, actually. 2. Then another team taking like a, say, like the Seahawks at 6. I would actually grade the Texans a little better. Like both take Wilson, 1 at 2, 1 at 6. You would think it'd be the opposite, but mainly because of fit, because this guy needs the right fit for him to be as good as he can be. But that doesn't mean I would grade it super high, because you're taking him at 2. You're passing on Will Anderson. You're passing on C.J. Stroud. That's my big issue there, actually. So, and maybe they end up taking him, but we will see. It's definitely very interesting what's going on with the Texans now, who it feels like they're really on the clock, as Bryce Young is most likely going 1. So this was not one from today. This was one from last couple days. The Colts prefer Will Levis over Anthony Richardson. This is kind of the ultimate smoke season one that's playing mind games with me. Like, I can see it either side. A lot of these are playing mind games, but because they've been mocked Anthony Richardson a ton, his dual threat running ability is, with his legs, his physicality fits Shane Steichen quite a bit, pretty well at the 4th overall pick there. So that's a big reason he's been mocked before. His stock has been soaring, according to fans, according to media. We really don't know in the league, but based on his combine and his upside, perhaps. Then all of a sudden, while there's talk about the Cardinals maybe trading the 3rd overall pick away, one spot ahead of the Colts all of a sudden prefer Levis over Richardson. Now, first glance, it just seems like ultimate smoke, because you're worried. You don't want to have to trade up one spot, and you're worried that a team is going to hop over you and take your guy, Anthony Richardson. So that seems like ultimate smoke. It's got smoke written all over it. But at the same time, I also keep hearing that Will Levis is going to go earlier than people think. Like the league is way higher on him than fans in the media. They're kind of taking his 2021 tape more seriously, where he had a better offense coordinator, maybe a better team overall, a little bit better protection, and was healthy. And a lot of that could make sense. So if he's going to go earlier, and I've seen like scouts and executives say that Richardson kind of has a further floor, like out to the 15 range. Not that he's going to drop that far, but Levis is definitely going to go inside the top 10 is what they say. So that almost makes it sound like, more top teams in the top 10 have Levis graded ahead of Richardson. So this is a very, and then Richardson's they're both risky picks. I'd say Richardson might be a little more boom or bust like. So I could argue both sides there, but then you factor in the Colts. What's their situation? Are they going like stage 1 of rebuild mode? Are they tearing this thing down, rebuilding it, or are they trying to quickly retool it? And I don't think like Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard, who might be on thin ice, and Shane Steichen, who's coming from winning situation, I just don't. And they have some star players on their team too. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, Shaq Leonard, DeForest Buckner, and they got guys that maybe are close to being that, or in somewhere in the ballpark, so I don't love their roster right now, what they really did in free agency, but so I'm not trying to say they're great or anything like that, but based on everything I just said, I don't think there's interest in starting from scratch. And Anthony Richardson is more of a project than Will Levis. He has more upside than Will Levis. He is more of a project than Will Levis. He's a guy that you might feel more comfortable sitting right away. The Colts really don't want to do that. They don't want to do either of those things. So if they do want a quarterback, you got a guy, Will Levis, who actually played in a pro-style system more so under Liam Cohen 2 years ago, and he kind of gives you like pro-style vibes, that actually can make more sense. So I'm starting to this is a 50-50 one, but I'm starting to believe this one, as I'm believing everything right now for the most part. But it's something I kind of told myself the last couple of years. Like I always used to believe everything was smoke, really close to the draft. But I say the day of. That's something I really told myself last year. Like we heard all these things the day of or the night before, and I kind of was like, nah, like that's smoke. Like Stingley. Going to the Texans, or like all these picks, and they end up being right. I'm like, man, I should have believed that stuff. So, but this does have this smells a little bit like smoke at the same time, like how I first started explaining it. It's a very interesting situation. What's even more interesting is kind of some of the stuff we were talking about, like the report from Adam Schefter. What if the Colts get the get to choose the second quarterback. So Bryce Young goes first overall, and then defensive players go 2 and 3. Or maybe there's a lineman in there for the Cardinals. Who knows? But maybe not. So the Colts get to choose between C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and then Hendon Hooker, which is very unlikely. What the hell happens? Like, could they, saying they prefer, the report is they prefer Will Levis. I think people kind of added on there, like, because since they've been linked to Anthony Richardson, they prefer Will Levis over Anthony Richardson. Do they possibly prefer Will Levis overall, over everyone that's available to them? Pretty wild if they took Levis over Stroud, or it wasn't Anthony Richardson the whole time. Could we be sitting there on draft day and be going with either scenario, whether it's just over Levis or over Levis and Stroud, which would be pretty wild again. But could we be sitting there and saying like the whole time, like we knew it originally? I could see us sitting there saying that. The Colts had Richardson. They were taking him the whole time. But it'd be pretty damn wild if they took either guy over Stroud. But I've talked about this before. A big mistake that teams make all the time, every draft, is kind of, in a way, deciding on their player before the draft, understanding their range, who's likely going to be there, who's likely not, focusing on sometimes they don't even know they're doing it, kind of gets programmed in their head, like who's going to be there. They're going to focus on those guys a little bit more without even trying to, maybe pay attention a little bit more on the film, and they fall in love with those guys, and they insist like that. That's their guy. It happens all the time. It is one of the biggest mistakes teams, GMs, coaches make all the time. Probably the biggest. And that's why players continue to slide. Like one guy starts to slide, you didn't expect it. He keeps sliding, sometimes because of injury and stuff like that. He keeps sliding because teams already didn't plan on him being there. They decided, not every team, but they decided on somebody else. And if the Colts somehow took Levis or Richardson ahead of Stroud, I don't think they would. I think they would take Stroud, my prediction. But if they did it, it'd be one of those classic cases. Big mistake. Classic case. It would be one of those in those situations. But I think if Stroud, it's too early. It usually happens like in the teens or, everywhere throughout the draft. Second round, like this guy's not supposed to be there. But we already kind of decided on this guy being our guy. He's a good fit. But so I don't think the Colts would do it. But if they did, that's what I would be saying happened, and I would not grade it well if they took one of these guys over Stroud. But who knows? There probably are some teams. I've actually heard that some teams maybe have Levis over Stroud or Levis over Bryce Young. Maybe they have Stroud one, maybe they have Levis one. I've heard that. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but this is becoming a very interesting draft, especially because there's so much up in the air here. But sticking with kind of the same graphic here with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. It was a report by Mike Girardi that there are at least 3 teams. So 3 teams have told him this, so it could be more. It's just the 3 teams that actually voiced their opinion to him that don't have first-round grades on Richardson and Will Levis. And this is like, I don't know if we should be really debating this. Like, to me, this is definitely another fact that there's going to be some teams that don't have a first-round grade on these guys because there's a lot of teams that most teams would only take a quarterback if they are in the first round, if they are a must-have, sure thing to them, starter with a great upside that could be Pro Bowl level. Most teams kind of view that. Like, if we're going to take a shot on a quarterback, that's how we have to view them, whether they're going to be right or wrong. That's how they view them. And then, so that's a lot of teams. So you take some of those teams, they won't really view the raw, like, boom or bust guys, like guys they really have to work with, as a guy, like a must-have guy. Like, that it's not for every team, a team, and then you factor in Richardson's kind of, I don't want to say scheme dependent, but almost like needs a certain scheme, perhaps system. And then, so that kind of will have some teams like, we wouldn't be interested because he's raw, too much work. And then we're going to work with him in a totally different system. So Richardson makes a ton of sense that some teams would not have a first round grade on him. And he's had, people take the accuracy very seriously. And right now his accuracy isn't there. Definitely could get there. And then Levis, who really struggled this year and had some durability things pop up and, lacking the touch on the ball, it's pretty difficult to coach. Like, to me, sometimes it's like the best way to explain is like he doesn't know, not all the time, doesn't know his own arm because he'll underthrow a lot of balls, but he has plenty of arm strength. He might have the strongest arm not only in this class of like the last how many classes, right? maybe since maybe over or maybe I don't know the word I'm looking for, but since Mahomes, like around that time, point is he has a crazy strong arm, so he's not lacking the arm talent. It's not why he's underthrowing balls. He just doesn't really have the touch. He doesn't know how to place the ball, so some teams like, I don't know if we can fix that. So we're not going to grade him in the first round. So this makes a lot of sense. It doesn't mean these guys aren't going first round. Does not mean that at all, so I thought this was a pretty straightforward one, that this is definitely the truth with Richardson and Levis, with some teams not having first round grades on them. Let's talk about non-quarterbacks here. This was a Peter King one as well. Several teams believe that the Seahawks are taking Jalen Carter, and usually teams get a pretty good idea. We hear like right before the draft every year, we hear that like the majority of teams think this is going to happen. They got the idea from that team that they're going to do this, and they seem to be pretty accurate. They're pretty good at doing what's part of their jobs. They're pretty good at it. So several teams think the Seahawks will take Jalen Carter at the 5th overall pick. And I've been mocking this, and I think the last time I said I'm feeling pretty good, maybe it was 2 mocks ago. I've mocked it the last 2 times, but one of the times I said I feel pretty good about this one. And then you get this report, makes me feel even better about it. But this is actually a tricky one. This is a tricky one, actually, because I am mocking Jalen Carter to the Seahawks, and I do think several teams believe that they're taking Jalen Carter 1. But this is why it's tricky. Are they guaranteed to take Jalen Carter if he is available at 5th overall? Are they guaranteed to take Jalen Carter? I'm going to say, let's throw Smoke and Jay Cuddy up there. I think that's smoke if you want to say it that way. That's not really what's being said, though. Are they guaranteed? They will not pass, and maybe they won't pass Jalen Carter, like guaranteed if he's there. But the reason I say it's smoke is everything else that is going on. Factor in the other rumor. Texans don't take a quarterback. They don't even take Will Anderson. They take Tyree Wilson 2nd overall. The Cardinals, maybe they trade there, and then they take Will Anderson. Here, then we're leaning towards Seahawks, Jalen Carter. So you see where I'm going with this. Maybe somebody trades up, take quarterback at 3. Colts take quarterback at 4. Hey, 5th picks, you're on the clock. Carter's on the board. Will Anderson's still on the board. I don't know what they would do in that situation. I would like to think they would go with Will Anderson. That would kind of be like 60% Will Anderson, 40, maybe a little closer around that range, So that's why they aren't, they're not in a situation where I don't think they call up Jalen Carter like, hey, sometimes this happens. If you're on the board, when we're picking, we're taking you. I don't think they can do that because Will Anderson might be available. Maybe they don't even like Will Anderson, but I think they have to. I think it's a good fit. And he's an incredible player. So is Jalen Carter. He actually might be more talented. That's why maybe they don't pass on him. But you have the off-the-field issues as well, and the Seahawks are looking for an edge rusher and a defensive tackle. But saying that, if you're saying that the Seahawks like Jalen Carter, they're likely to take him if he is available, and maybe Will Anderson's off the board. I'm gonna say fact. I do think it's a fact as well that several teams believe that they're most likely to take Carter. I've been mocking as well. I've kind of felt confident that their most likely scenario, like that, if there's odds, it's Jalen Carter. So that I do believe, but I won't say that they're guaranteed based on how the draft could shake out, the surprises that could happen, and kind of the other reports that maybe a guy like Will Anderson's there. So pretty interesting. In the Steelers, this was another Peter King from his article this morning, which comes out every year. Sometimes he has multiple of them. Pretty legit stuff. He says the Steelers could trade up to... We'd actually heard this. I actually thrown that scenario around, and it was kind of being reported by some Steelers guys that the Steelers could be trading up, and then specifically they said the 9th pick, the Bears. Like somebody said that they specifically called the Bears. And I saw Bears writers saying, probably not because it's too early for it to happen. I'd argue against that. Like they can make the call and just talk about things. Nobody said they were actually going to trade. So the Steelers looking to trade. This is kind of a multiple parter here. And it's a tricky one. Steelers looking to trade up. I think they're interested. I'm going to say fact. They're looking to trade up. Could they trade up to the Bears pick at 9? Sure, possible. Could the Bears look to trade back from 9? Possible. I still think the Bears are no, they're still in rebuild. They could look to add more picks for this year, more picks for next year. They didn't they've added a lot of pieces in free agency. Some one-year deals. The big deals were kind of the linebacker, added a guard. They still have needs that we thought maybe they'd fill in free agency, so adding more picks makes sense to the Bears. So I do believe that. Will it specific, like, does it have to be the Bears pick? Like, they would only trade up. I think most likely, if you say the Steelers trade up, like, they're guaranteed. If you told me they're guaranteed, for sure. You're from the future. They traded up. And you're asking me, who was it with? I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I'd say maybe most likely it was the Bears. But if they trade up, are they guaranteed to trade with the Bears? I'm going to say smoke. I'd watch out for the Eagles. I'd watch out for multiple teams around that range, but the Eagles probably be next. But what you mentioned, this was a tricky part. What you mentioned, it would be for Jalen Carter, the Georgia D tackle, if he started to slip a little bit, and that's where it's tricky. That is where it's tricky because he's just so good of a player. Tomlin's going to value a good defensive player. He's going to value defensive linemen. So, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. And then they specifically mentioned 9 for Jalen Carter when, like, it seems like if the very latest he'll go is 10 to the Eagles, like he's going up by one spot ahead of the Eagles. So that kind of makes it even make more sense. But for D tackle, they do have Cam Hayward, and they did sign Ogunjobi to a big deal. It's not like Carter's going to play. He could play the nose, but it's not like Hayward's going to be around forever either. So I can argue both sides of that if they need Carter or not. Maybe just too good of a player to pass him, but you're trading up. They did trade up for Devin Bush, different story. But and this time I think it would work out in terms of the talent of the player and Jalen Carter. But how much do you trade away? How much do you trade up to go get a guy with off the field concerns? That's where. That's why it's tricky. I can see it, but my money is on if they trade up, and Carter probably not going to be there, and I don't think teams are expecting to be there. So I'm going to say smoke for it to be like they're looking to trade up, and it's for Carter. I'm going to say smoke. I can see it, but I'm going to say smoke because I think it'd be more likely for a tackle or a corner. More likely a tackle because they're on the hunt for a left tackle, kind of the last piece of the puzzle. I mean, of course, they can get better than the other pieces of the puzzle on the offensive line, but in their minds, and it will make them a lot better, they're looking for a tackle. And I just don't know if they can wait in their spot. At one point, we thought they could wait at their actual pick with 17 and grab a good one will drop to them. Starting to think not so fast. I mean, they're starting to get pushed up. Darnell Wright is soaring up. He's going earlier. Paris Johnson's going to go early, and a couple of other, and then they're probably not going to view DeJuan Jones as a fit because he's strictly a right tackle, or maybe they won't view this guy, that guy as a fit. So I think most likely would be a tackle. They could use a corner. Maybe they really like Joey Porter. They could sit and wait for him, but there's some really, really good corners at the top with Gonzalez and Witherspoon. So I maybe more likely for one of those guys, but very interesting. And I did hear, not on the video in terms of graphics, but we're about to talk about it. I did hear I heard the Eagles could trade back. We just talked about that, with the Steelers, even though they can trade back, they can look to gain more picks, even though they have 2 firsts. They don't have a lot of picks in the middle of the draft. They lost a lot of guys in free agency. Trading back and more picks actually could be less expensive, financially, cap space wise. They're cheaper picks. And then more players, which you need. So that would make sense. But I also heard the Eagles could move up, and if they were to move up, it would be for Jalen Carter. I don't think they would move up far, but if he started to slide and they felt like they had to have him, that's who they could move up for. So that's interesting too. I could see that. I don't know if they're in position to move up. They do have 2 firsts, and they would probably hang on to that other first in a certain scenario. Interesting. So Eagles, kind of keep an eye on them as well. Not just the Bears at 9, but the Eagles at 10, not just the Steelers. There's going to be trades we expected that didn't happen. The Cardinals, there's going to be trades that we did not expect to happen that could happen. There's always going to be that. This was interesting. This isn't there wasn't a legit report like Schefter, Rappaport that the Falcons are going to take Bijan Robinson or Nolan Smith. That wasn't a report, right? But a lot of buzz about this. Some legitimate people just keep hearing it from multiple different people that aren't really connected. They're saying it on their own, separately. They're not saying it because this guy said it. This is something that we keep hearing. And then people that make mock drafts that really only make 1, 2, or 3 mock drafts at this time of the year, and they base their things off what they're hearing from league sources. So I've seen Bijan Robinson and I've seen Nolan Smith. It doesn't mean they're deciding between the two. I've seen that some people are very confident that it's Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas, and some people are very confident it's Nolan Smith. And so that kind of put that together. It kind of feels like, based on that buzz, if you're believing it, it kind of feels like they're going to take one of those guys. And I've heard it enough where it's definitely interesting, where, maybe you can say chances are they're going to take one of those guys. But I'm just going to say this is smoke. Even though I'm hearing it a bit, I would still, like, if we're live day one of the NFL draft, I'm sitting right here on camera while we're watching, I'm still going to be like, wow, like if they took one of those guys. Like, even though I got a heads up from other people and right here in my own video, like I'm still going to be surprised. Bijan Robinson, elite running back, sure thing guy. He's had some injuries in the past, but sure thing guy. Pro Bowl potential right away. There's a very realistic scenario where he's known as the best running back in football and very near future, perhaps. So worthy of the pick. The Falcons like to run the ball a lot, Arthur Smith's scheme, but I don't think they value running back like that. Even though they value running the football, I don't think they value running back like that. I don't think they want to spend value there, whether it's high draft pick or money. High draft pick, you can argue, is more valuable than the money, like the big money. And they'll get pretty, because they get pretty decent money on top of it. But they drafted Algier late and they used him. Like, hey, we'll take a running back late that has experience and we use him. He looked pretty damn good. Doesn't mean they're set. They got Algier. They can't get a running back because they got I'm not really that type of guy. You're gonna kind of always find ways to get better. But that was kind of their philosophy. It worked out for them. They have Cordero Patterson, who they like a lot, who's kind of a hybrid player, but they like at the running back position. I remember, when they hired Arthur Smith, and I was in love with Javonte Williams, North Carolina running back in that draft, and I loved him for Arthur Smith's scheme. Like, that was one of my favorite fits in that draft. Perfect. He values running the football. This is maybe his Derrick Henry. And they were on the clock with him on the board, and they traded the pick to the Denver Broncos instead of taking Javonte Williams. And then guess who the Broncos took? They took Javonte Williams. So I'm like, okay, Falcons aren't valuing running backs like I thought they would, not even close. So with everything that they could use a corner and a pass rusher pretty badly. I think they could be sneaky with another guard, taking Skoronski, putting him at guard. That's a possibility. And then the lack of value on a running back. I don't see them taking one at pick. What did I say? They're picking eighth. So there's that. And then Nolan Smith, I don't see it either. I recently watched his film, and I guess I'm lower on him than everyone else. He's a risky pick that early for sure. He's a heck of a ball player. He's super athletic. He'll be solid. He's a good player. He'll be solid. He's better than expected stopping the run. He's pretty instinctive stopping the run. He plays bigger than his size stopping the run. He can drop in coverage. Against the pass, he kind of plays like his size, or maybe even smaller. He kind of relies on that get off and that speed, which didn't really work well for him because the tackles were just that much stronger. So you got to get faster and bigger, faster, stronger tackles in the NFL. It might be a little tricky. So it's hard for me to see him going that early, but teams don't agree with everything I say or other people say. They kind of do their own thing. Okay. But then the Falcons, they bring in Ryan Nielsen, who, coming from the Saints, and he doesn't have to, maybe Ryan Nielsen doesn't do everything the Saints do. What Dennis Allen thought on defensive players, maybe what Sean Payton, I'm sure, had an input. With that front office, their philosophy on pass rushers, but he was there for a bit. Big piece. I'm sure he had something to say there. That's just not, to me, that's just not their type of pass rusher. And then he brought in some Saints players. He brought in David Onyema. He's got some physical guys in there. Their pass rusher is a big, physical, lengthy pass rusher. That's just going to go to work off the edge with their power and their length. Like, to me, that's not Nolan Smith. But again, maybe he's bringing a little bit of his own flavor. It's not exactly what the Saints had. Or maybe he doesn't fully have a say. They're just going to take whoever's best on their board, that front office. Possibility. But in terms of that, like the fit is basically what I just got at. And then where I think really his range is, the draft, that just seems way too early to me. So that's why I'm just not believing either one of those. But I've seen a lot of people saying, I'd say more so Nolan Smith. Like they're pretty confident Nolan Smith is going 8 to the Falcons. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know about that. So another interesting one there. And then next, the Cowboys won't pass on Michael Mayer. And this was actually from Dane Brugler, who's a big-time NFL or draft guy. He had a mock draft. I think this was his first mock draft or second. First, I think it was his first. And we're going to have one more right before the draft, which I can't wait to see. But he actually had a quote in there with the Cowboys in his mock taking Michael Mayer, the Notre Dame tight end, from a league source that they are not, if Mayer's there, the Cowboys will not pass on him. That's kind of what they believe. It's a little tricky too because you don't know who else is going to be there. Like, what if Bijan Robinson's there? What do you do then? But I do believe it though. I do believe that right now the Cowboys are saying, like, if he is there, they kind of plan on it. But I guess it kind of depends on who else is there. Like, they didn't call Michael Mayer up and say, if you're there, we're 100% taking you. Like, I don't think they did that. So I'd say if that's the case, I'd say that's smoke. But if he's there, they most likely take him. I'm kind of believing that. League source really believes that. So, and they told Brugler that. So kind of buying that a little bit. But it's so much later in the first round that who else is going to be there. So they could change their mind possibly. It's a possibility. And then one more teams could be passing on Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but teams maybe hesitant to take him in the first round due to the lack of snaps. He had the hamstring injury this year. He played in 3 games, but he only played in like 1 full game basically. And then last year, where not this past season, the one before, where he went off mainly towards the end, maybe towards the Rose Bowl. He still was somewhat limited in snaps because the starters were Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Of course, he played with them, but they had Wilson in the slot quite a bit, which JSN plays in the slot. So limited snaps, injury last year. So at first glance, it's pretty interesting. And then I tweeted this, and people were having fun with it, interacting a lot with it. Because at first glance, it is interesting, but at first glance, it's pretty interesting because could he slide a little bit? It's not necessarily saying that he'll slide a bit, though. Of course, so this is a pretty obvious one. Like that, of course, there's going to be teams that will pass on him, would rather take another receiver, maybe because they fit a little bit more, because, they're worried because they didn't get to see enough of them. They really value seeing a certain amount in college, X amount of snaps. But that's realistic, very realistic. So this is a fact. It's an easy one. This doesn't necessarily mean he's going to slide tremendously. I still think he could go. I wouldn't rule I know there's some Bears fans that really want him, but I think they're kind of done with receivers right now. But I wouldn't really rule out the Eagles at 10. I'm not saying that's my prediction, but I wouldn't rule it out. But I look at the Titans at 11. I actually think if the Texans looking to take a receiver at 12, I actually think they're one of these teams. I don't know if they necessarily are just scared of JSN because he had limited snaps and because he was injured. I think they would legitimately just like Addison better. It's just my opinion, kind of based off fit. Just my opinion. It could be wrong on that. But then I could see the Packers as well. But yeah, he could slide a little bit just because there's just more than a couple, more than we thought on teams that just don't want him because of the lack of snaps, or they like Addison better, or whoever it is. So he could slide a little bit. I really don't think he gets by. We start to look at a team like the Chargers. I think will like Addison better as well. But if Addison's gone and JSN's on the board, the Chargers won't pass on him. The Ravens and the Vikings won't pass on him. So I don't think, and some of those teams might like Addison better too. Maybe the Vikings might like Addison better than JSN. I could definitely see that. But we're talking about multiple teams. He already got by the Titans and the Packers. Is he going to get by all those stretch of teams? I just don't see it. So if you're saying, which is not being said here, but that teams, too scared, he's going to drop. Teams know they can wait for him, which I guess there's a percentage. There's like a little bit of a percentage chance that that's the case, where teams know that do like him, know they can wait because other teams are scared about his injury or be scared of the lack of snaps. There's a chance that he slides maybe a bit. Maybe I don't think he goes early second, but maybe there's some sort of chance because of that reason. But I just don't see it again. But this isn't really news to me. It was interesting at first why I reported, and it is an interesting talking point. Like, where could he go now? But is it really giant news? Not really, because we kind of knew some teams might not be super interested already, and especially with the lack of snaps. So, yeah, this is a video that I just kind of decided to jump on here and do just because all the news going on. The Schefter one really got me going here, like that. And I was starting to think that in the back of my mind too, because we knew Bryce Young was going 1. We kind of thought Maybe the Texans don't like a quarterback at 2 since Bryce Young's gone. So what if the quarterback starts to slide? What if teams don't trade up? There's a lot of time in drafts. That's something that ends up being like, not smoke, but ends up not being 100% accurate. The trades. People hype up the media hypes up these trades that are going to happen like crazy. They don't really happen. They aren't BS. They're legit that teams are calling and teams are interested in seeing, what it would take, or maybe, going through a scenario because they might have to trade up because something happens during the draft, but they don't end up happening. Doesn't mean those reports were completely fake. They just end up being like wrong, I guess, because they didn't happen, so, that's why I'm believing some of this stuff, but we'll see. There's going to be smoke and there's going to be not smoke, and it's tough. It's a beautiful part of the NFL draft. Tough to kind of divide all that up. But the last couple of years, something I told myself last year is maybe start believing some of the stuff, but especially the day or so, or on the day of the NFL draft. So that's still to come. It's a week away from this upcoming Thursday. What's today? Monday. But yeah, that's something, the rumors that float around on the day of the draft, really, I guess maybe we'll follow most of them. We'll see. But that wraps it up. We'll get working on an updated mock draft with Bryce Young going first overall and kind of use some of the stuff that I'm believing. We're also ripping out some of our draft prospect rankings. We're getting through those. There's a playlist full of them. All kinds of content. We live during day one of the NFL draft. If you're not following our Twitter, you are missing out. If you don't have a Twitter, make one. You won't regret it. Links pinned in the comments for anything you look for. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.